Welcome to the Remedyforce Winter 18 Insight session. I'm Nikhil Deshpande. I'm a member of the Remedyforce product management team. This is our legal notice letting you know that what we are showing you today is regarding a future product. This information is under NDA and our safe harbor statements apply. Any purchasing decisions should be based on what is generally available today. Let's begin by looking at enhancements to Self-Service 3.0. Category lookups have been enhanced to display the category tree. This allows clients to browse through the category tree and select the most appropriate category for their request. This is available in both incidents and service requests. Clients that are not familiar with the category tree can search for any value and the system returns matching categories real time. Besides, the search results are displayed in a category hierarchy. Lookups for other fields also have been enhanced. When a lookup on any field other than category is invoked, by default, a few fields are displayed. A plus symbol indicates that more fields can be displayed if so required. Admin can configure the number of default fields and the number of additional fields that are displayed in the lookup. Admins can also configure whether to show or hide labels. A new configuration has been introduced in this release related to lookups. There are two additional fields, number of fields in default view and number of fields in expanded view. There are also options to show or hide labels. The fields that are displayed when the lookup is invoked come from the field set column headers on the respective object. The only exception to this is the base element object, which is used for CMDB records. These records are displayed from the base element all list view under list view customization. The service catalog now provides a much superior user experience compared to previous releases. In previous releases, as a client browsed through the service catalog, they would see subcategories as well as the service request definitions all in one page. Not only can clients browse through subcategories, but these subcategories also appear as filters. A breadcrumb trail at the top also allows the client to navigate to any node in the category tree. When a client browses through the service catalog, there's an existing configuration, something that's already existed for the past few releases, that controls whether the request definitions displayed when a category is selected are just the ones specific to that category or also the ones related to subcategories under that specific category. Hyperlinks have been introduced on service requests. This allows linking service request fields to policies and procedures that clients must be aware of as they submit service requests. The hyperlinks are set up on service request definitions. Again, this is not a new configuration. On the service request definition input fields, one can set up the URL associated with the service request input field. At runtime, when the client hovers their mouse over that field, they can see the full URL. Besides, the URL has a hyperlink allowing the client to visit that web page. Dependent pick lists are a Salesforce feature that we are leveraging in this release. Dependent pick lists allow for a much better user experience through much shorter pick lists at runtime. To use dependent pick lists, it is necessary for the admin to set up controlling and dependent fields on the relevant Salesforce object, in this case, incidents. Salesforce allows you to set up dependencies among those between those objects. Once that configuration is done, it's necessary to add these two fields to the relevant field set. For tickets, it's the field set self-service ticket layout. For service requests, it is request details self-service 3.0. We also support the field set service request left panel or service request right panel. In previous releases, self-help articles were displayed directly under the View Self-help Articles menu item. In this release, we allow admins to set up self-help articles such that they are displayed under a category tree. The other enhancement is that at runtime, clients can choose to order records, that is, the self-help articles, either by title or popularity. There's one new configuration that has been introduced related to this, which is display knowledge articles segregated by categories. This configuration is available on the General Self-Service Settings page. The main panel of the self-help articles page is almost identical to the service catalog. This allows you to view the breadcrumb trail associated with that category. Besides, users can also filter on subcategories. They also have the option of ordering records, that is, self help articles, either by title or popularity at runtime. We've also introduced the ability to view self help articles in a maximized window. This is especially useful for those self help articles that have a lot of content and which would have otherwise required a lot of scrolling. We have introduced the ability to update their profile fields, including their profile photo. Now, the way this can be accessed is a little different on Lightning Experience and Salesforce Classic. On Lightning Experience, the only way a user can update their profile fields is by going to My Activity, and when they hover mouse over their profile name, a hyperlink appears. Clicking on the hyperlink pops up the profile form. To update profile photo, just click on the space for the photograph wherein a hyperlink for add or update photo appears. On Salesforce Classic, there's an additional way of updating profile fields. Under the user chevron, users will see a My Profile option. Clicking on that pops up the profile form. There's an existing configuration page to be aware of. Again, this is not new, but it's relevant to know in the context of updating profile fields. Admins have the ability to allow or disallow clients to view the My Profile on the application banner. Another thing to note is that the fields that are displayed on the profile form are controlled by the pick list self-service My Profile. Usability improvements have been made to the approvals page. You'll now notice that pending approvals page is similar to the My Activity feed. There's also improved formatting of record content, quite similar to My Activity. Once a record is selected for approval and clicked, a window pops up, and this window has got both approval actions, approve and reject, on the same form. We have introduced the ability for clients to view their assets from Self-Service 3.0. This is similar to what was already available in the Salesforce mobile app. Clients can view CIs and assets assigned to them. Although the option is called View My Asset, it includes CIs as well as assets. Clients can also view tickets related to a specific asset. When they select a specific asset, there are hyperlinks for them to create new tickets or view related tickets. The tickets displayed related to a specific asset are similar to what's displayed on the My Activity page. The ability to search, copy, edit, close, and reopen tickets is also supported. There's one configuration to be aware of to leverage View My Assets. To enable this in Self-Service 3, the admin must go to Tile Visibility and Order and enable the tile View My Assets. Another thing to note is that the structure of the feed, that is the set of fields that are displayed on my assets, is according to the field set sf1 underscore bmc underscore base element underscore details. Yet another usability improvement is reduced white space. In previous releases, the entire homepage had a very static look and feel, wherein no matter what the screen resolution, the number of rows and columns displayed was identical. With this release, we dynamically set the content depending on the screen resolution. This allows for a more efficient use of display resolution, and it also allows the user to see more content displayed on the main panel. This is how Self-Service 3 looks on low resolution displays, which is identical to what it was on all displays in previous releases. Let's look at how Self-Service 3 looks on slightly higher resolution display. As you can see, there's an additional column and two additional rows of tiles. And yet higher resolution displays, typically most modern laptops come with display resolution of 1920 by 1080, And on such displays, you'll see that there are up to 5 columns and 4 rows in each section. Now let's look at Remedyforce Lightning components for self-service. Lightning components are part of the Salesforce Lightning Component Framework, which is a modern framework for building single-page applications. There are two ways in which Lightning components can be used: Salesforce Communities and Lightning Apps. Salesforce Communities allows for adding self-service capabilities in as part of an existing Salesforce community. You can also build a new Salesforce community and add components related to Remedyforce self-service. It must be noted that using Salesforce communities requires customer community plus licenses for all users. The Lightning components we have developed can also be used to build Lightning apps. Lightning apps are one-page apps that are built using Salesforce Lightning App Builder. Users can add components from Remedyforce, Salesforce, and other components from AppExchange. Access to Lightning apps as well as Salesforce communities is controlled through the existing Salesforce access model of profiles and permission sets. Now let's look at where Lightning components for Remedyforce can be found while building a community or a Lightning app. In Community Builder, you can find these components under Components, Custom Components. In Lightning App Builder, they can be found under Lightning Components, Custom Managed. Now let's look at the first component, Submit Ticket. This component appears as a button, and its purpose is to pop up the Submit Ticket form similar to Self-Service 3.0. This component has two parameters. The first one, Override Button Label, allows you to provide a custom button label. The second parameter, Template, allows you to associate an incident template with this incident form. The second component is Service Requests. This appears as a list and it can be dropped anywhere on the community. It has three parameters. The first one is title. This allows you to provide a custom title to your Lightning component for service requests. You can also provide a category as a parameter. Doing this restricts the service request definitions to just the ones associated with that specific category. You can also limit the number of service requests that are displayed in that component if there happen to be space constraints. The next component is self-help articles. This also is a list of self-help articles. It has three parameters similar to service requests. First one being title, the second one is category, and the third one is number of articles. It should be noted that with all three components, the user experience of interacting with the system is almost identical to that in Self-Service 3.0. The only difference being that in communities or in App Builder, the user is already authenticated by Salesforce. That's why there is no authentication required when a user clicks a component. The power of Lightning components is such that it allows you to mix and match different Lightning components from different sources. To your community or Lightning app, you can add Lightning components not just from Remedyforce, but also standard components from Salesforce or any others that you may find on AppExchange. Please note that if you decide to add components from Salesforce or AppExchange, the installation and use of such components is governed by the respective vendors. Mixing and matching components allows you to mix different components. For example, in the screenshot, you can see there's a tabs component, which is a standard Salesforce component, to which the service request component has been embedded within the tabs component. In fact, there are multiple components embedded within the tabs component with different components on different tabs. In the second screenshot, you'll see the Remedyforce submit ticket button Lightning component. And along with this, if you want to provide some text narrative to explain what the button is to be clicked for, then you can use the Salesforce standard component rich text editor. Just browse through Salesforce components and App Exchange to find any other components that may be relevant to your community or Lightning app. Thank you for your time for the insight session.
Thanks, Nikhil. I'll be covering the improvements around the CMDB in Winter 18. First, I'll just walk through the enhancements and then we'll drill into each one individually. In Winter 18, we provide a number of new enhancements, including the new and improved integration with BMC Discovery. We've expanded list view customization with the relationship tab and the lookups. We've added a configurable filter on active and inactive records to control what users can see by default when logging onto the CMDB. And we've also added enhancements to the multiple instance editor, including a mass change feature and some usability improvements. And lastly, we added improvements to the rule-based asset class to provide more flexibility on how you define those rules. So let's start with the enhanced integration with BMC Discovery. For those of you who might not be familiar with BMC Discovery, it was formerly named ADDM, or Application Data and Dependency Mapping. It's been around for a long time. It's a leader in the space. It's a very powerful tool focused on data center discovery. And because it's focused on data center discovery, it has the ability to really dive into a lot of detail on not only identifying the servers and instances that are out there, but the components, including clusters, including databases, for example. And not only identifying those components, but also identifying the relationship of those components to other components. So why do I care as a Remedyforce customer? Really the big benefit here is it gives you a more complete view of your data center by discovering a much wider range of devices and the relationship to those devices. All that information, all the relevant information, can now be passed into the Remedyforce CMDB and can be viewed and leveraged. You'll have the ability to view the relationships through the CMDB Explorer. You'll have the ability to link components and associated devices to tickets, for example, incidents. So let's talk about the specific enhancements. The first one being multi-cloud discovery. This is a newer enhancement that was delivered by BMC Discovery, which is now leveraged with our integration into the Remedyforce CMDB. So with the BMC Discovery discovering cloud instances, whether they be public or private, those instances and their relationships are now passed into the Remedyforce CMDB. In addition, we also support application services and relationships. One of the strengths that I didn't mention earlier about BMC Discovery is that it supports application dependency mapping, meaning that it gives you the ability to define logical groupings. I always use the example of an ERP system, which can consist of multiple databases, clusters, servers, applications. A wide range of different components can be grouped under that ERP application service. You can define that kind of logical grouping in BMC Discovery. That kind of grouping is also passed as a CI and its relationships over into the Remedyforce CMDB. Relating to that is that we've added additional classes. So we've gone from Relating to that is that we've added additional classes. We've gone from 6 out-of-the-box classes with the older integration through Pentaho to the new integration of 32 classes. So we've identified all of the relevant classes that BMC Discovery discovers today as out-of-the-box classes that you can automatically import into the Remedyforce CMDB, highlighting the point that you now have a much more comprehensive view of those devices and the relationship among those devices. We've also added automated updates, which means that any devices that become inactive, so if you imagine all the various devices, think of the cloud devices and other various components that are constantly changing. Hopefully not changing too much in the data center, but they do change. When those devices change, maybe they're removed and something's not discovered after so many scans. Well, within BMC Discovery, you have the ability to identify what the rules are for when something becomes inactive. It might be after 5 or 7 scans by default. I forget the exact number. That device will become inactive. Well, that inactive flag is passed in the Remedyforce. So as soon as it becomes inactive, it's passed, and you can see what's active and inactive from within Remedyforce without having to go to BMC Discovery. The other big thing here, too, that I alluded to earlier is that Pentaho is no longer required. So the older integration used Pentaho, third-party tool that had to be installed locally. The new integrations leveraging APIs in our interfaces to avoid having to install any other third-party application locally. It's all done through both Remedyforce and BMC Discovery for the setup, which I'll walk through here in a minute. So with that said, let's just walk through at a very high level the setup of the integration. The first step, and the only step that's required on the Remedyforce side, is the need to create a connected app. And the creation of a Connect app is a pretty standard process on the Salesforce side if you haven't already done it. It takes just a few minutes. There's just a few parameters that need to be created. And the intent of a connected app is it will define a secure connection between Remedyforce and that external system, in this case BMC Discovery. And you can see here it does use a number of standard protocols to authenticate, so it is a secure connection, and again, it just takes a few minutes. That's the only step that you have to complete on the Remedyforce side. Once you complete that step, it will actually create a couple different security keys or strings that we will use on the BMC Discovery side to complete the integration. So we go to step 2. Step 2 is on the BMC Discovery side. Again, there's a UI that they provide. It's the same method that they use to integrate to the Atrium solution. Same technology, same process. So if you've already done that, you'll be familiar with these steps. A few parameters need to be entered, including the strings that were provided through the connected app. Once you create that connection, step 3 is optional. And I list this here just for informational purposes to make you aware of the various options that are available. It's not required, but once you create that connection, there's 3 other tabs. The first one being filtering, which would allow you to identify any records that you may not want to pass in the Remedyforce. I think this will be more an exception than the rule for most customers, as they'll want to import most, if not all, of the data they're discovering. But there is an option here to limit what data you import. If, for example, you don't want to import a certain class or a certain subset of records, you can define a pretty complex query here to filter them out. There's also a blackout window option. The blackout window simply allows you to identify when you don't run the sync. The sync is a continuous sync, but if there's certain windows where you don't want to run it, you have that control. Again, I don't think this is something that very many customers will use. It's an option that can be utilized, but there's very little impact on performance. Which is why I don't anticipate a lot of customers ever needing to consider this. But I don't know if you have, you know that certain systems are going to be down that you're using for this integration, and you don't want to run the synchronization, you could pause it for that period of time. And then lastly, there's a status. This is informational. I'm sorry. We also have the resync, and again, this is another feature that I don't anticipate few, if any, customers using. We're still trying to determine when this may be required. There are a few cases where if by chance we change the data model, or if we do something through the upgrade that requires a resync, or for any reason new connections created, a resync may be required. This simply just reestablishes the connection and re-imports everything. Again, this is not something that is going to be commonly used, but it's there in those rare cases. And then lastly, we have status. This is informational. This gives you detailed information on the status of the synchronization, what's being passed between the two systems. A lot of good detail here. This could be helpful if you're trying to troubleshoot any possible issues when running the integration. Okay. That concludes just an overview of the BMC Discovery integration. I would encourage anybody that's on the older integration with Pentaho to reconsider. I would encourage anybody that's on the Pentaho integration to consider moving to the new integration for all the many benefits. More classes, 6 to 32 classes, no Pentaho, simplified maintenance, relationships, being able to automatically see the relationships, and then the automatic updates tracking status. So a lot of key enhancements here. Each one on its own could justify the upgrade, but all 4 of those plus enhancements really provide a significant value. The one limitation in contrasting and comparing Pentaho, the old integration, to the new integration, is that we do not provide the ability for you to configure the mappings. So if for any reason you want to add fields or modify the mappings, which we would not recommend, that's not available in the new integration. I don't anticipate few, if any, customers needing that, but if there are the exception out there that have their own mappings, then you need to understand what the differences are. We will continue to support the older integration for a period of time, but our focus will be on this new integration and supporting additional enhancements with this integration. All right, so let's move on to the other enhancements with the CMDB. The first one being configurable filter on active and inactive records. Got a lot of feedback from our customers on wanting the ability to only see active records. Some of our customers were having issues where users were going in and selecting records, not realizing they were inactive, and either assigning them or updating them, causing some issues. So what we've done is we've added a new option. You can see in the screenshot here, marked as deleted as a new option. And when you upgrade to Winter 18, this checkbox will not be selected, meaning that when you log in, you will only see active records. If for any reason you want to see all records, you can hit that checkbox and that will now be your default. So that checkbox will determine your default value. So it gives you the flexibility to support either case where you only want to see active records or all records. The important point is that you need to be aware of that feature so that when you upgrade, you understand why you're not seeing inactive records. The other reason we added this was it wasn't very straightforward for you to quickly look and find only active records. So this new flag makes it very simple to do that. We've also expanded list view customization in 2 key areas, mainly within the relationship tab. So on the relationship tab prior to Winter 18, you did not have the ability to configure the columns. It was hard-coded. And now we've added a new relationship record under list view values to where you can control which columns appear in this view. And what's nice is that we've added both the relationship object and the base element object. So you can choose fields from the relationship object along with the associated base element record. So if you want to add, for example, the serial number location along with relationship details, you have that ability to do that within this view. As also mentioned here, we've added the ability to configure the device lookup on the relationship. So when you're creating a new relationship or modifying a relationship and you're trying to do a lookup of the device to link to that parent record, prior to Winter 18, that lookup view was hard-coded to only include, I think, the instance name and a description. So if you were trying to find a record across a bunch of records, it could be difficult. So what we've done is we're leveraging the base element CI list view record to control that view. So now you have the ability to control what columns appear in that view also. Another big enhancement is the multi-edit mass change. So with the multi-edit, which is in essence a spreadsheet kind of view of your CMDB records, you can go in and pick individual cells to update. We had a lot of cases where customers would want to make a mass change. They may want to move 20 records or however many records from one location to another, or change the status, whatever that change might be. They wanted to make the same change across multiple records. And that's what this new feature does. So we've added a column on the left-hand side, the checkbox, where if you once you hit a checkbox, you go into multi-edit mass change mode. And there's a row that appears on the top just below the column label. And that row gives you the ability to enter in a value. And based on the rows that you select, when you hit save, that value will be assigned. So in the case here, I've selected CI status, and maybe I want to change all my records to deployed. So I hit the select all for selecting all my rows. I select deployed under CI status. I hit save. All my records have been updated to deployed. It's that simple. And the beauty of the multi-edit page is that you can control what appears on this screen. So when you're on the CMDB page and you do a search and you get a subset of records, you click multi-edit, it will pull over all those records in your search into this view. A few things to be aware of. There is a limitation. 200 records when reconciliation is off. You can update 200 records as the max. If you have reconciliation on, the max is 20. That's something we may consider down the road expanding, but within the Winter 18 release, that's the limitation for the two conditions. And then the other thing to mention is we made a number of usability improvements on this multi-edit page, including the ability to identify the number of rows per page from 20 to up to 200. You have the ability to see the number of records and the number of pages, and you have the ability, and you have the other usability improvement we made was we're locking the instance name. So the column on the far left will be locked regardless of whether you scroll left or right, it will remain in the same position. Whether you scroll left or right, it will remain in the same position. The other usability improvement was prior to Winter 18, if you wanted to get to the horizontal scroll bar, you had to actually scroll to the bottom of the page. That's no longer the case here in the multi-edit. It will always be visible no matter where you are on the page. These usability improvements are applicable for the main CMDB page. We have not addressed them on the main CMDB page, but they're enhancements that we are definitely looking at and trying to work into the roadmap for a future release. And the last improvement we made with the CMDB is around rule-based asset class improvements. Specifically, we've added support for OR for rule-based classes. And this was driven by agentless discovery, where agentless discovered devices, for agentless discovered devices, they're actually being discovered as workstation devices, and we didn't have a workstation class, and identified and determined from discussing this with customers that we would rather leverage the existing desktop class. And by adding the OR statement, we updated the desktop asset-based class to include workstation devices, so they're all lumped together in the same class. If for any reason you decide you want to have your own workstation class along with the desktop class, you can create it and do your own mapping. But for most customers that we talked to, they thought it would make the most sense to just leverage that same class for both desktop and workstation devices. The other benefit here would be that with the OR statement, it gives you the ability to create more sophisticated rule-based asset class conditions. I'm going to pass this over to Virginia, who is going to cover the Remedyforce console and other improvements. Virginia.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. So moving along with the new enhancements that we've added to Remedyforce Winter 18, Remedyforce is now fully supported in Salesforce Lightning. Previously, as part of Summer 17, we made changes to ensure our console worked. But we heard from more and more customers who use Salesforce for their sales and marketing teams who had a desire to be able to use Remedyforce in either Salesforce Classic or Salesforce Lightning. Winter 18 provides you that ability. We'll cover how to turn on Lightning for your org, and we'll cover two small differences you'll want to be aware of. In order to use Lightning and Remedyforce, there are a few things you need to configure. If you try and work with Lightning components provided by Remedyforce, you must enable My Domain. My Domain assigns to your company a unique URL that will then be utilized by the Lightning components. There are other great features that come with My Domain, and we encourage you to check out Salesforce Help for details. In Salesforce Setup, Salesforce has introduced the new Lightning Experience Migration Assistant. There's a lot here to help you think about potentially migrating to Lightning, but the big point here is that under Turn It On is where you can actually enable Lightning for your org. Finally, you'll want to create a Lightning user permission set. Enable the Lightning Experience user permission, and then assign the permission set to those users you may want to start testing out and working with Lightning. There's much more to Lightning, and we encourage you, if you're interested, to check out the numerous Salesforce trailheads that will walk you through configuring Lightning in your org. Remember to always test in a sandbox first. As part of the switch to support Lightning, we found that Salesforce hosts all things Lightning under a unique and different URL from that of Classic. If you are providing a link to a record for staff via email conversation, and you're either moving to Lightning or now fully support Lightning, you'll want to configure email conversation for your specific scenario. We currently default to Classic, and the setting can be found under Email Conversation Settings. In this example, I've selected both Salesforce Classic and Lightning, so staff, depending on which environment they are working with, can select the appropriate link to take them to the reference record. Another change that needs to be made to support Lightning pertains to our knowledge articles. The ability to assign knowledge articles to accounts has been recreated in what is called a Lightning component. A Lightning component is part of the new Salesforce Lightning framework and is a new way of developing on the Salesforce platform. We discovered that the page that was controlling accounts on Classic won't work in Lightning, so we needed to recreate the action in a language Lightning could understand. In preparation for the switch, we've introduced new layouts for knowledge articles in Lightning. The primary changes here are we removed the account Visualforce page component, and we've removed the display in self-service checkbox. Both of these items are now part of the Lightning component called Manage Self-Service Access. As you move to Lightning, you'll want to be sure and assign these pages or backport the changes to your custom layouts. The new component called Manage Self-Service can either be added to the Lightning page as a component as shown here, or as an action. Both ways are described and covered in our documentation. The important note here is we've consolidated the assignment of accounts along with the making of the knowledge article available to self-service all within the single Manage Access component. We now offer support for Salesforce files. Salesforce Files offers support for files up to 2 GB. Salesforce Files is the preferred way to manage files within Lightning, and by supporting Salesforce Files now, we'll be in a better position to take advantage of other features from the offering in the future. Note that attachments processed from emails are still restricted to 10 megabytes. Customers who move to Salesforce Files should find attachments continue to work and are supported within knowledge articles. As of Salesforce Winter 18, Salesforce no longer supported hyperlink fields containing JavaScript. While we made changes to our Summer 17 release in anticipation of this change, Many customers had created similar custom fields to allow for easier linking to records on the task object. In Remedyforce Winter 18 for tasks, we've now added that linking capability for you. Each link now has an icon that will open up the associated record in the Remedyforce console. Keep in mind this is only applicable for tasks at this time. In Winter 18, we now introduce our first version of page layouts for incidents and tasks. Page layouts will now allow you to have layouts that are more specific to groups who may not be in IT. Additionally, if you have a call center taking calls for pretty much anything within your company, they will now be able to create the appropriate form for the group. You've always had the ability to create page layouts and assign them to profiles. We've now taken that concept and expanded upon it. In this example, I have a facilities form with unique field sets that only expose those fields that facilities cares about. The difference now is that I can assign just those categories that facilities cares about without them having to sort through all of the categories used for IT or other parts of the business. Similarly, we can also assign templates the same way. Assigning layouts is still done on a profile by profile basis, but now you can assign more than one form to a profile and select a single form as the default. In this example, I have 3 different task layouts assigned to my staff. When they're in an incident and they opt to create a new task, they'll have the opportunity to choose from any of the 3 layouts. However, if they elect to create and link tasks to incident, then their default layout will be used since that creation is done automatically. Note that layouts for tasks apply regardless of whether you're creating the task from change, problem, etc. We've set up page layouts to be restrictive. This means if staff do not have a layout assigned to them and they try and access a record that has that layout, they'll get a message stating they don't have access. We still have some work to do in this area. For example, if you expose fields via the console and staff has legitimate Salesforce access, they'll see the contents of that field. This option is turned on by default and is currently being controlled by a custom setting. The custom setting is set to true out of the box to restrict record access, but you can set the setting to false and anyone who doesn't have the layout assigned will still be able to access the record assuming all other standard Salesforce security configurations are in place. With the introduction of Salesforce Process Builder, customers have noticed an increase of incidences of the dreaded SOCL 101 errors. Unlike workflows, when processes run, the queries and updates cause multiple executions of triggers. There are a lot of moving parts that have to run in the background to ensure that changes made to a record don't impact things like due date or service level agreements. We've worked really hard to reduce the number of calls our triggers make, but we wanted to see if we could do better and give you the option of bypassing our triggers altogether. In Winter 18, we are introducing a new object field called Skip RF Trigger Execution. This is a custom field of data type checkbox. This feature, which will be in beta for Winter 18, can be applied to incident, task, or change requests. The idea is that if a process is updating a record and you are sure that the updates have nothing to do with calculations of due date, service level agreements, or applying templates, then setting the skip RF trigger execution to true will let our code skip the redundancy of running those checks with the hope of reducing instances of SOCL 101 errors. This is a bit of an eye chart, but it walks you through exactly how we are using the skip RF trigger execution. We have a variable to control the trigger execution and another variable to hold the trigger execution count. So when a process is fired, we initialize the 2 static variables. One controls the trigger execution based on the skip RF trigger execution setting, and the other variable holds the trigger execution count. As the code execution enters the before trigger, we check to see if skip RF trigger execution is set to true as part of the changes from the process. If it's not set to true, then we execute the before and after trigger logic, all the while keeping track of how many times our trigger is run. If the skip RF trigger execution is set to true in the process, then we set the flag in the record back to false and bypass running any code in the before or after trigger. At the end, we reset the internal variables so we can continue to set up for the next run of when a process or processes are triggered. So what does all this mean in layman's terms? A record gets created or updated. The processes are run, and if skip RF trigger execution is not set, then we process our triggers normally. However, if it is set to true, we skip our before and after triggers. The rule of thumb should or can be that if you have a process from Process Builder that is updating object fields that have nothing to do with application of SLAs, setting priority, due date, impact or drive due date calculation, or application of templates, then the skip trigger execution field can be set to true and you can reduce the number of SOCL queries being called. We'll also have additional documentation around the fields that are involved in the Remedyforce internal processes so you can better understand the boundaries. Some final thoughts. Keep in mind and be aware that this is beta. There may be scenarios or use cases where the setting cannot be applied or a use case we haven't seen yet. Always test in a sandbox first before implementing and monitoring in production. The feature only applies if you are using strictly processes from Process Builder or a mix of both workflows and processes. In a mixed environment, the setting is always set through the process and not workflows. And finally, we are introducing Remedyforce utilization. Remedyforce utilization is a tool that allows you and your business relationship manager to have a better understanding of how you and your company are using Remedyforce. It's an easy-to-use interface and can help you learn about available options within Remedyforce. Additionally, it includes best practices for features and helps you get the maximum gains from Remedyforce. This is beta and will continue to be building out this particular feature. We want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to your feedback on the Remedyforce Winter 18 release.